Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Z Talks with your host, Zaria Musgrove, where I talk about books, movies, TV shows, places, and things that relate to history and classic literature. Now, today I will be talking about samurai, specifically the samurai exhibit that I viewed about 2 weeks ago at the British Museum and some samurai books, specifically samurai detective books that I started reading last year, but am doing a follow up on this year because the second book in the series came out. So I will just dive into that, the books, the exhibit, history about the samurai, and just everything that you need to know about it. So without further ado, let's get into it. Now, the British Museum did an exhibit of the samurai not a couple weeks ago, because it was actually going on for a very long time, but I specifically saw it about 2 weeks ago. I'll put some pictures of it on screen, and I loved the exhibit. It went into everything about the samurai, from how they were formed, what they did while the class of the samurai was existing, as well as how they fell. And I found out a lot of interesting things about it, specifically what they wore, the artwork that was produced in that period, as well as just the establishment of this class. So for context, the samurai were first like coming into prominence when they served as kind of guards for landowners and governors in the 8th century. But then as time went on, they evolved into being kind of more militarized and serving as personalized for higher guards for im- members of the imperial family, and they kind of cemented themselves during the shogunate, the first shogunate. And shogunate, for context, means literally in the English translation of it, I think it means military government. So when the military government was formed in the year 1185, after a warring period in Japan, if you search it up, I think this is called the warring period. That's when the warring period in the Heian era, specifically, that's when the first shogunate was established, the military government. And this is when the samurai class was really cemented in society. And what kind of interested me about it was the fact that I actually debunked some of my preconceived notions, because before, I thought when they had the shogunate and the samurai class, there wasn't really an emperor at the same time. I just thought it was kind of just the military government, but apparently the emperor still existed at the same time as the shogunate, but the emperor was just kind of a figurehead, and they nominated and actually appointed each shogun. But the emperors sat in Kyoto, but the shogunate sat in Tokyo. And this was really, this dynamic was even further cemented during the era of peace, the Edo period, when the shogun that actually is like made the samurai official class and ordered society into different classes. The shogun was Tokugawa, and this shogun ushered in 250 years of peace, and he ordered society into four classes, which was samurai, farmers, artisans, and merchants. And this is when the samurai became official as an official class. And he sat in Tokyo, which at the time was called Edo, which is why this period is called the Edo period. So that was interesting to me, the dichotomy of having the emperor sitting in Kyoto, but then having the shogun sitting in Tokyo, which was the real seat of power, because they held the actual power. And during this era of peace, the samurai actually did normal jobs, which is what shocked me because when you see popular media about the samurai, you think they were like fighting all the time and in the shadows with swords and just going on random battles for honor. But this was not the case. During this long era of peace that was ushered in by Shogun Tokugawa in the Edo period, the samurai actually did normal jobs. A lot of them took up government jobs and bureaucracy, became artisans, became artists. A lot of art was produced during that period by samurai. And they just lived normal life. Some of them became firemen because apparently a lot of Tokyo at that time was built in wood, and this city would randomly catch a flame. So, a popular job for samurai to do was to be firemen and put out the flames. So, did not know that, but learned that through the exhibit. But it was normal jobs like these that the samurai would actually do during this era, which was completely like shocking to me and caught me off guard. But that is why I love these books, which I will talk about now. The Samurai Detectives. I started reading these books late last year with this one, the first one. These books were actually published in the 1970s, but the licensing rights for the English translation was only granted, I think, starting in 2024. So the English translations of these books were only published fairly recently, but they are established in Japanese culture as being historical fiction crime. So it's a different genre that I'm usually used to, which is a historical fiction crime genre. So you have this samurai detective book set in this time of peace during the Edo period, and you get to see the samurai actually operating not as we imagine them in popular media, like doing random fights, but operating as normal people, being bureaucrats, being hired as personal bodyguards, just leading normal lives, doing normal jobs, but fighting on random tournaments, which were more a kind of pastime, but not something that was an obligation, which kind of shows what was actually happening through this period. But why I also like this book is that you get the historical aspects of it, but also a bit of detective work because, as the book says, samurai detectives, there are crimes that happen in this book that are related to the samurai. And there's a specific samurai, a retired samurai in this book that is solving the crimes, which is super funny because this book is funny. This book should be called a historical fiction crime drama comedy because it is super funny. You get to get a taste of such dry humor where you don't know if you should laugh, but you do laugh. So that's another reason why I like this book. I do highly recommend it, not only because you get to see what the samurai were doing at a normal time in this period, but you also get a glimpse into why the samurai class started ebbing out, which was something else that I had to do a deep dive into because, for context, one of the main reasons that is given for the kind of slow ebbing out and the just fading away of the samurai class is the Meiji Restoration, where the seat of power was shifted from the shogun and shifted back to the emperor. And you had, with the emperor reestablishing his power after this whole time of the military government being in power, you have the creation of the national army, which kind of made the samurai class sort of redundant because you don't need private mercenaries anymore to fight random bursts of wars, but you can actually have a national army that fights wars for this new, not a new, but this new formation of nationalism in that era, which pushed against the notion of the samurai, which didn't fit into this new nationalistic identity that was forming in Japan at the time. That's the main reason that is given in the British Museum and in popular scholarship for the fall of the samurai, the Meiji Restoration. But When I did some research, I also found that another reason is often cited in scholarship for the fall of the samurai, which shockingly is poverty. And I read a lot of books on it. Not books, I read a lot of articles on it, but my not favorite, but my the article that I liked the most that talked about this issue was from the Kyoto University Economic Review, and they cited the fact that the samurai became poorer and poorer as the time went on, which led to the slow degradation of this class. Because in one of the pictures that I will show now, you will see the hierarchy of the samurai, and next to the hierarchy, you will see that they get paid in rice. And yes, I said it, they get paid in rice. And rice was the form of payment for the samurai, not only as in them receiving rice, but they could also trade the rice that they got for money. But over the whole term of that peaceful era, the Edo period, they got paid in the same amount of rice that they got paid from before, if that makes sense. So just imagine you get a salary. It's not too far fetched from what's happening now because this is reality. Your salary is like $100 today, but then inflation rises 5%. The $100 is not worth as much as it was yesterday because inflation rises. And imagine that, but being stretched across continual inflation for 250 years, and coupled with the fact of fluctuating prices of rice. So the samurai class kept receiving the same levels of intake for rice as their form of payment from the shogun for just being samurai, but they had to receive this steady level of payment against the fact that rice prices kept fluctuating. So you're keeping the same level of expenses, but your pay is always fluctuating, so you can't really plan your life, which is why the samurai class was slowly degrading and kind of diversifying away from what they were doing it for in the first place. Because wrapped up into the samurai, which this article explains, is the idea of honor. Being a samurai was a really high place in society because of the social classes and that I listed before. The samurai was at the top of that. But as time went on, apparently this article was saying that people would actually sell their samurai titles because the samurai people were they were like samurai families where I think around 10% of the population were able to be samurai, and you were born into being a samurai. That was a right that you held from being in a certain family. So only 10% of the populations from birthright were born into being samurai. And as time went on, it found that some people would sell these birthrights titles because of rising poverty. So they would, instead of having it pass on to their son and keep within the family, they would sell the title of their son, the title of themselves to someone else for money just to keep themselves afloat. So you have the degradation of the status of this class because it's not held in such high esteem because it doesn't pay to keep it within the family, which is what I found so interesting and is what is depicted in these books in a very subtle but very prominent way. Because as of late I've been getting into more historical fiction rather than all out history books because I'm beginning to find a change in my taste where I like the subtleties of history in books, and the subtlety of history is really displayed in this books through the social relations people have with each other and seeing how the samurai live their normal life and try to make ends meet in this book as well. And I liked it so much that I got the second book because the second book in this series was released in the English translation this year in February, and I immediately got it in March as a birthday present for myself, and I started this morning actually, and I'm really enjoying it. And I haven't even read more than 10 pages in, but I can tell I'm gonna like it, so I really highly recommend. So, yeah, I recommend that you guys read this book. It follows the the samurai. His name is Kohei, solving crimes, but also taking you through the Edo period and lets you learn more about samurai and the history. So, yeah, that is all I had to say today about the samurai detectives and the samurai history and the British Museum exhibit. I will say, if you have the chance, definitely pick this book up. And if you have the chance to go to a museum that features even a little bit of Japanese history and touches on the samurai era, I would definitely recommend learning more about it because it will debunk some of the perceptions that you have around samurai in popular culture and let you see how complex it was at that time, how they rose, how they fell, and their actual existence instead of thinking that they were just doing random battles. Because they probably weren't, and they were probably bureaucrats. So, yeah, that's all I have to say today. Highly recommend the books. And if you don't want to read the books for some reason, um, you can head over to my Instagram page or my TikTok page for different book recommendations in different genres. Or if you don't want to read that or watch those videos for different book recommendations, you can just stick around for another episode in about another 2 weeks where I will be talking about a different book, which I am currently reading and enjoying. And you would know which book I'm talking about if you follow the Instagram page. But wait around for that in another 2 weeks on another episode of Detox.